Dark Souls, God's gift to me. DSR has had a special place in my heart since it first launched in 2018. Its brutal challenge and non-story is what lulled me into even liking Dark Souls in the first place. It was just this game that I kinda heard about before, but I never really knew anything about it. I was still in high school. Now, obviously, almost 7 years later, I've done my time. Poured hundreds and hundreds of hours out of my own pocket to play these games. Spent over 1,000 clams on Dark Souls stuff. I even got the board game and DLC and that one book set that people made. That's pretty cool, the Abyssal Archive. I love Dark Souls. Great games, love them to death. Especially 2. But even with 3 eyeing me in my library and with Elden Ring only barely scratching my Dark Souls itch, I always come back to Dark Souls Remastered specifically. You put my game time on a pie chart. You give me $1 for every hour played, I'll cash that bitch in for half a bando. This game is so wonderful, and on PC especially, it's honestly the best way you can possibly experience Dark Souls. Unmodded, the Xbox and the PlayStation releases keep up. So who the hell would want to play this? It's so hard for me to even put into a few words why I love the Nintendo Switch port specifically. If you followed my snail trail of videos, this ain't my first time talking about a Switch game. Or my second time. And core fans kinda know how I feel about the Switch and the ports that come to it, but hey, times change. I'm a man now. My older takes are definitely older, but there's been a lot of time between that video and now. As I heard other people's takes on the games I criticized, I realized that the Switch only really has to do one thing. Be convenient. And have a good library. And it takes a half step in both directions, but the entire time I criticized Skyrim, I failed to realize I'm critical of it for the same-ish reasons I love the Dark Souls port. Even though I even compared the two. But whatever. I think I'm better at this thing than I used to be, so here goes. What's up? I'm Jake. I like Dark Souls. Long story short, Dark Souls came out on the Switch. Me likey. But it's not DSR. Not quite. Dark Souls Remastered is the definitive way to play the original vanilla game. It launched in 2018, so not too long ago. At least, it used to be not too long ago. The original game came to the PS3 in 2011, and it was rough. Real rough. 1 year later, the Prepare to Die edition launched, which just kind of added the DLC as part of the base experience, kept the vanilla's 1.06 patch, and did nothing else. So to jump from this to this was exciting. The remaster cleaned up a lot of problems and bugs the original had, while not really getting all of them. But obviously it looks better, it plays better, it feels better. But the jump to the Nintendo Switch didn't really give this game the same juice the other releases on Xbox, PS, and PC had to them. You can see it too. There are like 1,000,001 comparisons I can just make on the graphics alone because my PC and Switch characters were more or less around the same areas. Of course, there's all these New Game Plus files and all I have to show for it is a fucking gargoyle, Quilog, Capra Demon. It's not just in the graphics, but like, the sound is so helplessly compressed. It just sounds so much worse comparatively. You can literally just see and hear the differences between both versions when sitting at a bonfire. The game's frame rate is 30 FPS compared to its regular 60, which, I mean, come on. This is the Switch we're talking about. Can't say I expected that much. The frame rate has to chug sometimes, the combat feels way more stiff. It really just feels like I'm playing Prepare to Die with the $40 remaster tag slapped onto the packaging.
You leave me no choice. I was once grateful to you.
And you know what? I fucking like it anyway. The graphics are inferior, which adds to the charm and helps make it feel a little more like an original port of Dark Souls 1. The audio is also pretty poor. I mean, I think more poor than the original, definitely not the best. But I think the graphics and audio work extremely well together because of one thing and on one condition. It works well because, for me, Dark Souls Remastered tends to feel like the definitive version, the most polished version possible for this game. And I love playing DSR on Steam with or without mods. But in the same way that a vanilla playthrough of Skyrim might feel good, even if mods make it feel more fun, DSR also benefits from the same issue. I think having a little bit of a step back from the most polished version possible is fresh. It feels like I'm leaning more into an older Dark Souls aesthetic. It also only works well on the condition that I'm playing it in handheld. Now don't get me wrong, playing it on the TV is perfectly fine, but here's the sitch. Playing it in handheld, the graphics are still poor, the frame rate is still 30, the screen, however, is smaller. And it's in my hands, so I'm using the audio a little more casually. Like, I don't mind how the sounds sound. It kind of feels cute because I'm playing Dark Souls, conveniently. If my Switch ever leaves my house, which is almost never, it is for me to play two games. Hyrule Warriors or Dark Souls. If I am traveling, I'm probably playing Dark Souls. If I want to play my Switch character, I'll opt to play it in my bed, handheld, rather than on the big TV in front of me, or I'll play it somewhere else in my house. I absolutely love finding somewhere to set myself down, like I'm gonna read a book, except no, I'm playing Dark Souls. Don't let me oversell this to you. I'm not playing this game all the time. I only have about 60 hours on the Switch, which is a lot, but I've had it on here since 2020. I'm just now talking about it as a thinly veiled excuse to gush about the game, baby. The TV is not a bad option, per se. I do want to kind of call back to that because my reason for not liking this sort of playstyle is kind of superficial. For me, I do have it on my PC, so I play it there when I want to play on the big screen or when I want it to look nice and feel nice. The Switch's version's flaws are kind of big and obvious when on the size of a display that my TV is. The graphics aren't as clear, they're actually quite murky, and the charm of playing a slow, mildly janky game in your hands isn't so cool when it's now kind of hard to see things at all. It's just like, okay, I liked it in handheld, but I can't stand it now. I don't really know how else to explain it. It kind of feels like, comparing the Switch and the PC version, one feels like I have glasses on and glasses off a little bit. And I'm no longer respecting the audio as casually as I was in handheld. I kind of feel the poorer audio quality is much more of a drawback on the big screen. It's more obviously muffled or crackly, whatever you would call it, and it still doesn't feel like it comes out right. Which, keep in mind, is perfectly fine because that hasn't stopped me from progressing on the TV for little bits before. I even got 2 straight hours of footage just for this video. I think it just left a bitter taste in my mouth because a lot of my TV experience was spent grinding the Lost Izalith boss, which, no matter how many characters I try it on, I can't seem to do this frickin' thing in less than 10 minutes. Fuck you, witch. Handheld has its drawbacks too. Actually, the whole game has its drawbacks. I won't chew your ear off and rant about the Joy-Cons being uncomfortable to hold sometimes, but if my hands look uncomfortable, that's because they are. Also, I'm kind of embarrassed of how my pinkies end up stabilizing the system, so I was trying to hide them even though nobody cares. But there's less throw on the Joy-Cons than on a normal controller, and you can't really claw on this thing. I think Nintendo specifically designed them, or at least designed their games around not having to claw the Joy-Cons. Like, name one Nintendo game that requires clawing. Okay, fine. Dark Souls requires a decent amount of finger dexterity to play, and while holding B is the run button, it tends to get pretty difficult to run and move the camera at the same time. And that's fine. It is a challenging game to play, but nobody told me this would be such a challenging game to see. The graphics weren't just older, so is the lighting. If you look at this thing and go, man, I can barely see a thing on that screen, then I just need you to know neither can I. This game gets dark. Things start to chug sometimes. It's a game that's all around held back by the hardware it was shipped on, both in what you can see, interact with, and in what you can't. The combat is also, I don't know. It probably isn't much more different from the other ports, but it feels different. It feels like it's much more stiff, a touch more janky than usual. My characters feel a lot more fluid in the real remaster, but then again, so do bosses and enemies and online players. But I think that all of this drawback stuff just kind of adds to the challenge. I acquired and played a legitimately obtained copy of Prepare to Die Edition a while after I played the remaster. And you know, if I didn't state outright before, the Switch port seems to run on Prepare to Die Edition software. But not like entirely. There were still some things here and there that were tweaked. All the mechanical changes that could be made for the other ports made their way here. To put it to words, it's not quite Prepare to Die edition, but not quite the remaster either. It's like kind of its own thing. Kind of how Skyrim for the Switch has the same relationship with its older and comparatively equivalent ports, it's somewhere in limbo. And you know what? I fucking love that. The Switch version is such a challenge. I find it so much more engaging to play than the real remaster. Because it is completely and entirely beatable, I would know. But not unlike any other version of the game, you really have to lock into what it is you're doing. Because one physical or mental slip can spell your doom. The buttons are different, so I changed them to accurately reflect the normal controls, but then some buttons are different depending on the menu. I don't know. It can be confusing to CB and get your wires crossed between the different systems' control schemes, but now I play a PS5, no more Xbox to Switch rigmarole. And if you really want to, you can skip the controller and just throw the whole fucking console, because why not? That's about how much it's worth to me anymore anyway. I'm a veteran, I guess. I earned all my stars and my stripes, well, not all of them, haven't played the original PS3 port and I don't ever plan on it. But I'm not a pro by any stretch. And I think that's how most Dark Souls enjoyers are. Like, I'm supposed to die. I love getting annoyed at myself. I love looking like I've never played this game before. No, go ahead. Bully me. But I feel that for everything I give up in terms of graphics or audio or controller convenience, I'm gaining something else. Experience, maybe. I feel like it's just a new and different challenge compared to the almost same challenge that you can find elsewhere. And I think all of the struggles that I detailed with this system really do it for me. Yeah, they do it for me. This is what I fucking wanted, baby. This is Dark Souls, exactly as God intended. I'm sorry I don't have a lot of footage of later game progress, but I really wanted to talk about the Switch Edition itself and kind of poke to see if there's any interest in Dark Souls itself. I think the Switch Edition is a fine and different enough port to warrant owning, even if you own it elsewhere, on the condition that A, you really want to play Dark Souls, and B, playing an older edition portably is the move for you. Because I'm getting older, my mind changes. I think, honestly, looking back at Switch ports, all they really had to do is provide a great handheld experience. Sure, play it on the TV, but this console really only has a leg up over everything else except maybe a Steam Deck because it's portable, because it can run stuff like this. I want Animal Crossing, I want Souls, it's all here, wrapped into one neat little package for me. So, you know, it makes a very fine 8.5 out of 10 game for me on this system. The antiquities make it exciting and engaging. It's a thrilling spin on an old challenge. It loses a half point for those old things just because I'm fair, but not too fair. And it loses a whole point for the one thing it can't control, the multiplayer experience. I just want to touch on this and then I'll get out of your hair. Dark Souls, multiplayer. You know what carries the Dark Souls experience for me? All of its multiplayer elements. Now, Dark Souls is a multiplayer capable game. I mean, so many people will drop summoning signs and help others with bosses, they'll invade others' worlds and kill them, and I had a friend I played personally with on several character runs. If you drop a summoning sign, especially on the PC, you're probably getting pulled into some doofus's world. There are invaders everywhere depending on the time of night. And even as a solo experience, this game kind of nudges you into some level of multiplayer interaction anyway. You can see the blood spots from other players' death and watch other people who are in the same area as you at the same time die in 1080p. Other people's phantoms constantly appear around the world, giving you just a glance into the Nameless Souls playthrough. You can catch other players by the bonfires. You'll read others' messages, and other people can see you too, your ghost, your character by the fire, your blood spots, and this extends to your messages. You can put down your own and others can read them, so long as you're logged in and the message was written on the character you're playing anyway. Furthermore, I'm not even fucking done. The bells. Some of the first things you have to do to progress the story, which can take a long time for most players, is ring the 2 bells, one above and one below. The bell distinctly rings, and in this game you can always hear someone ringing that bell. There has never been a time in the last 7 years DSR has been out where I haven't heard either bell multiple times, sometimes back to back for minutes at a time. And those other bells are other players ringing their bells in their games. You're listening to proof of their successes, and when it finally comes turn to ring the bell, I revel in knowing someone out there heard it. In other words, you're always reminded of the presence of other people, even if there aren't any. That other people are playing the game, almost alongside you, just very, very indirectly. And the Switch doesn't really see any of that. Okay, well, it does. It doesn't in the sort of sense that I will drag this Switch out in public with me if I know I'm going to be sitting around for a long while. So not only is this game a little older in my eyes, but it's definitely a lot more lonely when you're in offline mode. Don't get me wrong, it's still excellent in this way, but I get a real thrill out of that multiplayer style interaction. However, at home and plugged into Wi-Fi, I'll see the occasional blood spot, I'll see a phantom or two. Hell, there's usually someone by the fire in Blighttown, not that I've ever seen that. I think this port of DSR just kind of suffers from an extremely slim player base at any one given time, and that's just counting all of the people connected to Wi-Fi, no less. There's still invader opportunities by Ornstein and Smo, there is extremely rare summoning signs. It's just, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to even participate in multiplayer to begin with, and I think knowing your chances are low stops people from even wasting the humanity to become human unless they need to. Unless they, for example, need Man-Eater Mildred. Then we're gonna rock. But you know what tickles my, funny bone? Hearing the bell. Every so often, ever so rarely, I will hear that fucking bell ring. Do you know how that makes me feel? Do you have any idea? I feel enchanted. I feel elated, proud even. Proud of the dumb schmuck who finally killed Quelaag. Proud that there's someone else out there right now playing this stupid fucking game that for some reason I can't stop playing. It's definitely one of the main reasons I haven't sold my Switch. Yet. Anyway, that is all. If you liked this, leave one for your boy. I'm kind of testing the waters because I really wanted an excuse to talk about Dark Souls, but I don't want to write something that no one will watch. So who knows? Maybe one of these days I will.